I once heard that everyone is an expert in something, even if it is just their own experiences. And there's something to be learned when someone tells their story. Even ordinary people can be hiding something extraordinary. I've decided to embark on a journey to find remarkable things in seemingly unremarkable places. Who knows how much there is to learn hiding in plain sight? The only thing I can guarantee is that whatever it is we find, it will be surprising. This is Subject, and I'm your host, Jared. The year is 1962. Sherry Chesson is a married mother of four and the star of Romper Room, a franchise children's television show in Phoenix, Arizona. Viewers, though, knew her as Miss Sherry, and she was a beloved and wholesome public figure. At the end of every show, she'd look through her magic mirror and say hello to all the children who sent her fan mail.
Tell me, do. Magic mirror, tell me today, have all my friends had fun at play? Today's a special day for Deanna and Scotty and Timmy and Alan and Terry and Indra.
When Sherry was in the early stages of her fifth pregnancy, her husband, Bob Finkbein, offered her a sedative he acquired in Britain to treat morning sickness. That drug, she later discovered, contained thalidomide, a chemical linked to severe birth defects. Because of this, Sherry and Bob opted for an abortion.
In all the soul searching I have done, I sincerely feel that I would not be giving life to anything. I feel that I would be giving a kind of living death.
With the promise of confidentiality, Chesson contacted a local newspaper to warn people about the dangers of thalidomide. However, Chesson's identity was leaked, and after a local prosecutor threatened legal action, the hospital where she planned to have her procedure decided against it. But this was a pre-Roe v. Wade world. Soon, Chesson's painful story was plastered across every magazine in the country, sparking a massive controversy. She began to receive regular death threats, having to be put in federal protection, and she subsequently lost her job hosting Romper Room. Chesson at first attempted to travel to Japan for the procedure, but was denied the visa. She ultimately had to travel to Sweden, which was where she obtained her abortion. But while leaving the country, she was rushed by reporters. This was her new normal.
Now that it's all over, do you still think that you've done the right thing?
More than ever. I mean, I don't know if it was womanly intuition or the God inside of me said, don't have this baby, and I didn't, and now I know it was the right decision.
It wasn't until just over 10 years later, in 1973, that the monumental ruling of Roe v. Wade took place. The Supreme Court issued a 7-2 decision, saying that the 14th Amendment to the United States Constitution provides a fundamental right to privacy, which protects a pregnant person's right to an abortion. However, the court also held that the right to an abortion is not absolute, and though incomplete, Roe v. Wade served as a foundation for basic rights. That is, until June 24th, 2022. That's when the Supreme Court overruled both Roe and Planned Parenthood versus Casey, stating that a right to abortion cannot be found in the U.S. Constitution. This decision demonstrates the increasingly conservative direction of the court and prompts questions about the implications for civil rights, American democracy, political polarization, and health policy. Now what we have across the country is a gaping hole in policy, and states are scrambling to forge a solid policy of their own. Also, more importantly, many Americans have found themselves caught in the crossfire of this political debate. There are people who may come to find the story of Sherry Chesson to be a new normal, a story that convinced a lot of Americans that this should not be normal. In fact, a poll was conducted at the time, revealing that the majority of Americans felt that Chesson did the right thing. She was pregnant with a child so deformed they could not determine the gender or guarantee it would even survive to the end of pregnancy. And even today, a majority of Americans support a person's right to choose. However, that right in many states has either vanished completely or is at risk of being struck down. We have returned to a world that is pre-Roe v. Wade. So what does that mean? And what's going to happen? What kind of stories are we going to hear now?
I'm on YouTube My channel is called Epic Kate Bjärgvide. It looks like if you're an English speaker and you just are saying it phonetically, it looks like Bjärgvide.
Okay.
But Epic Kate is a way to find me. And I do podcasts of people telling their stories and learning and growing and becoming a better person through hearing those stories. Awesome. Also with just creative, passionate people. I love to hear those kind of stories too. I also do vlogs talking about my expat life in Sweden with my adorable blonde-haired, blue-eyed family and the joys of pregnancy. Also, I have a second channel for people who want to be creators or who are creators, but sometimes just, it's about getting to the heart of creating. It's not like 5 steps to blow up your channel. Those are just a bunch of con artists, but this one is like the heart of creating, encouragement, inspiration, perspective, and it's called YouTubing with Katie. I'm taking a bit of a break with the blahness of being pregnant, but I'll get back to it eventually.
So here's a quick disclaimer about Katie, or Epic Kate. She is infectiously fun, so sweet, and pretty much impossible to dislike. Katie grew up in the heart of evangelical America, so from a young age, Katie's beliefs were rather conservative. Particularly, her view on abortion was pro-life, but as she got older, her views began to change. Your religion, obviously, your faith meant a whole lot to you. Where are you now in that journey?
Oh boy, how long do you got? I was very evangelical in those days. I was anti-LGBTQ. Mm-hmm. I was believing that we were going to go to hell if we didn't accept Jesus. I was all this stuff, and I wasn't going to go to say God hates slur. I wasn't like that bad, but now I'm just like, I don't believe in hell anymore. I'm 100,000% affirming LGBTQ. Mm-hmm. I was like as pro-life as they come. All abortion's murder. Now I'm like, oh gosh, it's gray. It's a medical issue. It's something that's between a doctor and a person with a uterus, to be using inclusive language there. Like, I'm completely liberal over on that side too.
So my question is, did you feel like you were properly educated about your own health and your own body?
Let me tell you, in 5th grade, we had maturation education where we learned about periods and that we would grow hairs and got some deodorant and tampon samples. And there was a diagram of the male anatomy. A scientific freaking diagram. My parents pulled that out of my book because I shouldn't be looking at something like that.
Though Katie led a sheltered life when she was younger, Katie also had a passion for theater, acting in particular. This led her to find a Christian organization called Covenant Players, who took her show on the road. At first, this company had Katie performing on the East Coast, but then they quickly jumped across the Atlantic to Europe, where Katie met her husband, and then later to South Africa, where Katie discovered she was pregnant. Okay, so I am going to just dive right in if you're cool with this. When we first start talking, the tiny bit of information you gave me was wild. So you born and raised in America, right?
Yep.
United States. You lived in South Africa for a while, and you're currently living in Sweden? Mm-hmm. So you're kind of a globetrotter. Can you explain this to me a little bit?
Of course. I was with a Christian theater company called Covenant Players. Started out in the US, spent 2 years mostly on the East Coast, went to Europe on my 21st birthday, traveled all over Ireland and England, all over German-speaking countries. Met my husband in Germany. We traveled all over French-speaking countries as well as German ones. And then we went to South Africa.
Is he from South Africa?
He's from Sweden.
He's from Sweden. Okay, so what was the affinity with South Africa? Was it just a place you always wanted to go, or what brought you there?
We went there through the organization that we were with.
Oh, okay, so you were performing plays?
Theater. We were doing plays in schools and churches and nursing homes and for daycares and wherever we could find people.
Did you do production or did you act?
We did acting. It was like we traveled out of a car or a van and we just set up a few chairs and a table and said, I want you to imagine that we're on a spaceship. I want you to imagine that we're in that beautiful house. And then we would set the set and take off a jacket, put a different outfit back on and go out and do different roles.
How are these like received? Were people usually really excited about it? Or I guess like, what was it like doing these plays across the world?
For the
Awesome.
most part, people loved it. Like in schools, when we were in non-English speaking countries, we would do English plays to encourage students to speak English and have fun with it, not to be like, no, that's wrong, don't make mistakes.
Interesting. So this brought you all around the world, basically, or you've seen a lot.
All over Europe, all over South Africa.
That's awesome. What would you say is like the biggest difference between South Africa and America?
The history of what people have had to deal with, of it being a completely, like the country started in 1989. You know, I don't even know how old you are, but that country may be older than you. The apartheid is so fresh in people's minds that it's still there. Like being in Germany and being like in former Western Germany and Eastern Germany, like it's in people's minds. Like there were Black people that just would not look me in the eyes because they remembered a time when they would literally get slapped in the face for looking a white person in the eye. Wow. Like being called madam, hearing people like, oh, people having these servants that I could go on, but just the racism that is just so there and so tangible. I mean, of course, the racism is tangible in America, and depending on where you are, some places worse than others, but to feel so visible as a white person. And so, and these expectations put on me, like when I was pregnant there and they were like, well, who's going to take care of the baby? Like they could not comprehend that there would be a white person that would take care of their own baby, because the white people, the rich white people, they're just, have servants to help them.
That's wild that that's still kind of a thing there.
I don't call them servants, but I mean, they spend every single day sweeping, mopping, ironing, doing their dishes. Wow. Like they clean the house from top to bottom every day.
That is insane. Let's dive into this. So you are in South Africa and you find yourself pregnant.
Well, it was a big mess with rules recently changing regarding visas. So before, you could go to South Africa, apply for your visa from there and extend it, because first you can only go for 3 months. Our 3 months ran up. Morton had to go to Sweden and I had to go to America to deal with it. First, we were in America together in California. And then when he found out that he could not apply from there, then we had to be separated for a month. And that sucked.
Yeah. So Morton is your husband who you met in Germany, and then you went to South Africa together. Did you learn that you were pregnant while you were in South Africa?
I learned I was pregnant when I was in California, separated from him.
Oh, yikes. Okay. So there was a lot going on.
I told him that I was pregnant over Facebook, like, have some news for you, sit down, holding my phone up.
Were you expecting this? Was this planned? No,
not at all. But stars in our eyes, just like, I've always wanted to be a mom. We're going to make it work. We're going to figure it out. Logistics be darned. We were married in 2010 and I started taking the pill on our honeymoon. And from that moment, I was like, don't work.
You wanted a kid.
Always. Then he's just like, what? His eyes were so big and it was such a fun memory. And then finally I got my tickets to go to Germany, where we were going to go there before going back to South Africa. And finally he was able to go back to Germany before going back to South Africa. And we were finally together and telling everybody. And then we were at a church in South Africa and I started to bleed. And I was like, oh no, please God, no. And just absolutely gutted, scared.
Miscarriages. They're much more common than most people realize. Between 10 to 20% of known pregnancies end in a miscarriage. And according to the March of Dimes, that number may be as high as 50% when we take into account pregnancies ending before a woman misses her first menstrual cycle. The majority of miscarriages cannot be prevented. Often, the pregnancy tissue will pass out naturally in 1 to 2 weeks, but sometimes medicine or surgical procedures to assist the passage of the tissue are required. But now that Roe v. Wade has been overturned, even women who wanted their pregnancies are being forced to deliver non-viable fetuses because the standard procedure to treat a miscarriage, called a dilation and curettage, or DNC for short, is now illegal. In Texas specifically, Attorney General Ken Paxton, he's suing the Biden administration over federal rules requiring abortions to be provided in medical emergencies to save the life of the mother. This means Texas has reverted to laws that were drafted in 1925, and even more draconian laws are being drafted now by state legislators. HB 1280 has already been approved by the House and Senate, and this law imposes a $100,000 fine or life in prison for any doctor in the state that provides an abortion. This bill makes no exception for those who are at risk of suicide or self-harm, pregnant as a result of rape or incest, or in the case of severe or potentially lethal fetal abnormalities. This effectively outlaws the DNC procedure, which can be the only option for some to prevent death. And this is the problem. This is the problem with wide sweeping legislation, blanket bans, and trigger laws. They approach a complicated issue as if it's black and white. They fail to acknowledge the gray. And there's a lot of gray. There's a lot of pregnancies that they're complicated, they're scary, and they don't go as planned. It's scary to think what predicament Katie would be in if she lived in Texas today. Katie found herself somewhere between that 10 and 20% of pregnancies. She didn't want to be there, she wanted her child. She was excited to be a mother. She'd already picked a name. This was not what she planned.
We actually had, there was a girl on our team named Abigail Gambo, and her middle name is Voyo Loike. And Voyo is a special name there that means like happiness or joy. And so she helped us to come up with Voyo as a nickname for.
I see. So you were in South Africa when things started to get, there was some warning signs that something was wrong.
But the very first ultrasound that I got was in Germany.
Okay.
And that kind of should have been a clue that there was something not quite right, that it was a blighted ovum, because I thought I would have been a little bit further along. The ultrasound was just a clump of cells. There was no body, there was no heartbeat. So when I started to bleed and went to the doctor in South Africa, when I showed him that ultrasound, he's like, he should have noticed something was wrong here.
So this doctor told you that this pregnancy is not viable, that it's not going to work.
I had started to bleed and it was not stopping. And he said I needed to have a DNC. And dilation and curettage is what the procedure is called. And he said that there was nothing growing in there. The egg was just getting bigger.
Yeah.
But there was nothing inside of it.
So, and if you would have not terminated this, what would have happened?
It could have gotten infected in my uterus. I could have died. I could have never been able to have children again if I hadn't died. I didn't learn until all of this Roe versus Wade thing came out that that procedure would have been considered an abortion.
So you didn't even think this was an abortion. You didn't think this was an abortion at the time.
I mean, they would consider it that way.
Yeah.
Which is absolutely cuckoo bananas.
Can you imagine any benefit from having that kind of procedure banned and made illegal?
Absolutely not. Like I could have died. Infections start like when people with uteruses give birth and there's a bit of placenta left inside and not everything comes out, like they can die from that. The body's not meant to hold on to things that aren't living and processing. It's literally only death that can come from not following doctor's orders. Like, it's not an abortion. It makes me so mad.
But people want to classify it as one. So what is your personal stance on the abortion debate right now happening in the United States?
It's so much more gray than they will give it credit for. And it breaks my heart how they think that it's a matter of convenience. Like, oh, you just don't have sex. Just, it's only people who don't want babies, but I've heard so many stories. I actually had a conversation on my podcast with a woman who had an abortion. The baby was growing perfectly fine. It was strong and healthy, but there was no quality of life to be had there. There was no impulse to breathe. There was going to be no life. Like she grew up Christian as well, and is not Christian anymore, but like even she used the term, there was no spirit. There was no person. And so the ethical thing was to terminate.
Katie's story isn't a perfect one. It doesn't forge the perfect argument. It would never be cherry-picked as the best example for really anything. For example, her care and well-being during this very sensitive moment in her life definitely could have been handled better, though at the same time, some have had it worse. Nothing about what she experienced should serve as the model for how things should be or how things should change. Instead, it tackles the reality of the situation, because her story is gray. Just like the situation she was in, there was no black or white. All she knew was that she had to have this procedure. And Katie's story isn't an ordinary one, because there isn't an ordinary one. Not when it comes to someone's right to choose. There are an infinite number of factors that go into it, and there is no one who is immune to being tangled up in such a situation. Anyone can be stuck between that 10 and 20% of pregnancies. When an ultrasound casts that painful silence, anyone could be in that room. It could happen to you. What happened to Katie could happen to you. And this is why it isn't black and white. None of our lives are. They're gray.
It was a horrific experience. I didn't know I was going to be spending the night. We waited hours, probably 5 or 6 hours in the waiting room before being seen. And one of the first things I had to do was give a urine sample, and it was like thick and pretty much completely red. I was losing so much blood that I knew that it really needed to make sure everything came out that was supposed to come out. Other than the excessive bleeding, I wasn't in any pain. I was just kind of hanging out with this big old needle in my arm and attached to the bag of water. That was kind of inconvenient pain. But other than that, I was just like, I don't even feel sick. Why am I even here? And then I didn't know I was going to be spending another night because they had too many people there. There were these huge wards. They're like 3 in a row. And they were, I don't remember how many beds were in each of them. Maybe let's say like 12 beds in each of them. I was in the middle one. There was a roll of toilet paper on the end of the other one. And you had to go all the way over there. I had an IV in my arm, had to go all the way to the first ward to get toilet paper, all the way through the second, down through the third to get to the bathroom. To use the bathroom. No electricity in the bathroom, so no light. My first night there was like, can I get a blanket? And they're like, oh, we don't have anything. Like, are you serious? Like, no blanket? Like this ratty, uncomfortable mattress, people moaning in pain throughout the night. It just felt like an absolute nightmare from a mental hospital. Like, and it was really awful that they like hardly ever getting any attention from any nurses or doctors. And when they did, they wouldn't even look at me. They would just be like, how far along were you? How old are you? How far along were you? Just looking down at a piece of paper and asking me that. And I just was like, I don't know, somewhere between so many and so many weeks. And it was very brusque and rude.
After seeing these conditions, weren't you terrified that something bad was about to happen?
I actually wasn't. I was trying to distract myself the whole time. I was playing games on my phone.
Yeah.
I was feeling lonely and awkward that there was nobody to really speak English with. There was a bunch of people speaking different African dialects around me. But once I was in the place of actually having the procedure done, everything was perfectly polished and shiny and futuristic looking. Like,
Interesting.
it was everything leading up to the procedure that was just absolute shit.
Though what Katie experienced took place practically on the opposite end of the earth, There are more similarities with her story than there are differences when it comes to what people are going through today in America. Saying that our healthcare system is flawed is not controversial. We are already seeing a record exodus of healthcare workers after the system has been so overwhelmed and abused by the COVID pandemic. Now bundle that with a sudden influx of people coming from bordering states looking for reproductive care, and you have a recipe for disaster. It's not hard to overwhelm our system right now, especially when many healthcare providers are still uncertain what's legal for them to even do. There aren't any clear answers. All we can be certain of is that this new trend of litigation in America is creating a lot of uncertainty. But I must hand it to Kate. Not all of us can be so positive and unbreakable. Though she's met head-on with misogyny and all other sorts of oddities, she holds the course. Because the one thing Katie knew was that she had to go through with this.
And the second night, a doctor came and he looked exactly like Trevor Noah. Like, whoa, good looking guy.
Yeah.
It was really a weird thing that he actually was like, I'm more concerned about those dots under your eyes. I have this kind of cholesterol weird thing that I almost look like I'm turning into one of those lizard people the conspiracy theorists talk about. So he was like, I'm more concerned about your cholesterol and this condition than this. And he was like, wait, what? They haven't done this yet? He was surprised at the lack of care that I received. And he gave me a pill internally there. And
Okay.
but he didn't tell me what it was about.
He didn't tell you what the pill was
I mean,
and what it was for?
it's not a memory that stuck with me, but basically what this pill was to induce labor. They just kind of scrape out the uterus and get everything out so that there's no infection.
Okay.
And so that was when the pain started, and the pain was worse than even my C-section. I just remember holding on to the side of the bed, riding these waves of pain, and going into the bathroom, which was dark because it was nighttime and there was no electricity, and feeling something large plop out into the water.
Oh, when you had passed the...
I don't know how much I'd passed or what, and just feeling so like creeped out by this, and like I'm wondering if I should go tell a nurse or something, and being kind of scared to see it. I was debating of whether I should tell a nurse or not, like if this was a significant thing, if they should try to get a flashlight and look and see what I dropped. One nurse had seemed kind of interested, but the other one's like, never mind. It's not important. When I was there, the people who were kind to me in those moments, they tried to be kind by saying, oh, don't worry, you'll be pregnant again really soon. That stung too. I was like, I don't want another one. I wanted this one. We were making plans. We were getting things donated to us by, and I was just absolutely broken. I was not even able to stand. I was sobbing so much. Doctor, he gave us some space, and I just kind of collapsed outside the car, waiting to go home. It was devastating. We just spent the next few days just in our room watching TV, watching DVDs, because we didn't want to cry all the time. So we were like, let's watch another episode, and then the episode would be done, and we would start to think for a second and start to cry again.
So you mourned the loss of this child.
Absolutely.
You don't regret having that procedure done, correct?
There was no choice. There was no life, and it needed to. I trusted the doctor implicitly. He said that there's no life, and that you need to have these ingredients removed. Otherwise, it's not good for you.
So at any point in this procedure, did you feel like this is crazy, this is terrifying, I'm going to regret this? Is there any of that you felt?
There was never I'm going to regret this about the procedure itself, because I knew it's what I needed. Like, I don't know how graphic you want me to be, but like how do you feel about blood?
So no, let's get into it. So blood and everything.
It was an awful, awful, awful time at the hospital.
Okay.
if you're a rich person, you can get a luxury 5-star hotel experience.
Interesting.
Everybody else gets a public hospital experience. And on the plus side, it only cost about the equivalent of $15. The whole procedure, the whole everything. So that was the only positive thing. There was like no signing out either. It was like no paperwork to leave. It was like, okay, you're done. Like one of the nurses, when we left, was like, hey, can you guys give me a ride to this place? I'll give you some gas money. Like,
one of the nurses asked you for a ride.
Yeah.
At the time, Katie did not realize that what she had just gone through would now be considered an abortion in many parts of the United States. And now that we're in a post-Roe world, more miscarriages and stillbirths could result in prosecution. Advocacy groups say 1,300 women were prosecuted between 2006 and 2020. In California, after serving 4 of the 11 years she was sentenced, Adora Perez finally had her charges dropped. The crime was having a stillborn baby. In Oklahoma, Brittany Pula is facing 4 years in prison for something that happens in 1 in 4 pregnancies. Even before the toppling of Roe v. Wade, the prosecution of women suspected of purposefully or accidentally ending a pregnancy was on the rise. Many of these arrests are related to drug use, but for women like Sherry Chesson, these drugs could be something that was provided to you by a loved one or even a doctor. What then? The way people see abortion in America needs to change. The reality is that less than 1% of abortions take place in the 3rd trimester, while 74% of abortions are some variation of the D&C procedure used to help women who have had a miscarriage and cannot pass the fetal tissue on their own.
So can I ask you, like, how do people think of abortion in Sweden compared to South Africa and America?
In Sweden, most people think that Americans are just absolutely, what?
Oh, just out of their mind.
Why do you treasure your gun so much? Well, why do you do these things? Like, they're just like, what's wrong with you?
I asked the same questions and I'm here. Do you feel like the public opinion is different in Sweden than it is in America?
The public opinion is much more of this is a medical issue. This isn't something that the government should have control over people's lives. In Sweden, sex isn't so like, like naked bodies. Americans are such prudes about so many things. It is what it is. They get extensive sex education from professionals. Let me tell you.
Go ahead.
Being pregnant sucks a lot.
Yeah.
It's not a fun thing, especially in those first few months. I didn't have it so hard either of my pregnancies. I didn't throw up every day like my mom did, but the queasiness, the blah, the exhaustion, the sensitive smells, it's not comfortable. The only reason that a person with a uterus would wait until the 2nd trimester to really be sure that it's the right thing to terminate is because they are getting every single test they can possibly get to determine if the child is going to have any quality of life. And one of those tests, I didn't have to do it, but the lady who went through an abortion that I had on my channel, an amniocentesis. It is a large needle that goes straight through the stomach, straight into the amniotic sac to test what's in there. It is extremely painful from everybody I've heard this from. And you only get this done, willingly get this pain because you care so much for the child that you just want to make sure as you can be that bringing them into the world isn't going to be causing them more pain. And the way that the evangelical fundamentalist people are like, they think that all liberals are like, I hope we get to kill some babies today. It's not like that.
I feel like there is this almost Pavlovian association with the word abortion and this image, this visceral image of someone throwing a baby in a blender,
Oh.
And that's very cringy, but that's not what abortion is. Like you said, about 90% of abortions occur, during the first trimester before there's a heartbeat, before it's really developed at all. And I mean, now we have
4 1 in 4 people with uteruses have had a miscarriage. Like many of them didn't even know that they were pregnant.
Yeah.
It's just like a little bit heavier of a cycle, and they're like, oh, that's weird, and don't even know. Like, so many pregnancies just aren't viable.
You've spoken to a lot of other women about the realities of abortion. What are some things that you feel like you've learned that you wish people would understand?
It's not an easy black and white thing. There's so much abuse and desperation and fear.
What would you like to see happen? What would you like to see changed?
Free birth control, extensive sex education training, better healthcare in general, paid maternity and paternity leave, like affordable childcare. The system that we're in is just so broken. Like, oh, you're forced to carry this child, but we're not going to help you at all. I just want people to have compassion and be willing to listen to the stories that go against what they've been told says, It's like, until I really heard stories about how much it hurts to be trans and to not be accepted and to feel total dysmorphia in your body, you don't understand. You can't have compassion until you're there, and how much it hurts for people to not be accepted for who they love, and how much it hurts, like, you go into Planned Parenthood and you're not even getting an abortion, you're getting reproductive care, health care, and you're having people call you a murderer. And these black and whites, this dualistic thinking just hurts so many people. Just open your mind to hear the stories and have compassion and just be a little more loving.
Before the overturning of Roe versus Wade, we had a long way to go. And now we have an even longer way to go. But thankfully, there's hope. Because thankfully, there are people willing to share their stories. People like Katie. People who can show the reality of the situation. And even better, Katie's story continues. Katie found out later that she was pregnant with twins, and now is pregnant again. Many people see an abortion as just a murder. But for Katie, the reality was she wouldn't be a mother today if she hadn't have gotten that procedure.
The pregnancies that you had, I mean, you're in the midst of one right now, but the pregnancy that you had after that one, how did that go? And how was that different from this one that you're talking about?
Well, we were so nervous. It was the same doctor, and Dr. Ramsebag.
Yeah.
And we're just wanting to see a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Just praying and praying for a heartbeat, for a body. When the doctor said, "Uh-oh, bankruptcy alert, it's twins."
Yeah, what was the emotional response there for you?
The emotion, well, Morton just was like somewhere between like nervous breakdown and laughter, like, and I was just, one of my first thoughts was just like, that's so special.
So this pregnancy with the twins, there weren't really any complications or anything. It was a pretty smooth pregnancy.
The complications was that Africa is not a good place to have twins because a lot more things can go wrong. It's automatically high risk. So they were like, we were trying to figure out what to do with me. What's the safest thing for me? What's the safest thing for the babies? So the plan that we eventually landed on was to send me to Sweden the latest possible time that I could fly.
Yeah.
And then Morton joined me a month later.
How old are your kids now, by the way?
They are turning 6 in August.
Oh, wild. Okay, wait, are they twins?
They're twins, yeah.
Oh my God. Okay, we'll circle back to that.
Again, for about 4-ish months after losing the first pregnancy.
Oh, okay, I see. So that's another point, is that like this procedure did not affect your fertility.
Not at all, no. I'm currently pregnant now, and yeah.
Oh, so you're on number 3, or are you hoping for more twins?
We have just one, and we were hoping for just one.
Okay. So congratulations, by the way. That's amazing. Awesome.
I want to thank Katie so much for sharing her story with me. because I feel like right now, in the midst of all of this political chaos, there's nothing more important than people telling their stories. Stories that a lot of people need to hear. Stories that expose a reality that we don't often see in TV or on the news. I also want to thank Katie for just being a magnificent guest and so fun just to talk to. If there's anyone who you want to get trapped in an elevator with, it's Katie. I have to vouch for that. So please do yourself a favor and look her up. She's Epic Kate on Twitter, YouTube, Facebook. You can also find her on a variety of podcasts, not just mine. Also, if you are someone who has experienced having to make a difficult choice about your reproductive health, I urge you, even though it may be difficult, tell your story, because your story is powerful. And just like Miss Sherry back in 1962, your story can change hearts, it can change minds, and it can change the world. Thank you for listening to Subject. I'm your host, Jared, and I hope you enjoyed this episode.